Hello, hello. So, this is probably the first time you've opened up ZBrush Core Mini, and if you don't know, ZBrush Core Mini is a very kind of stripped out version of regular ZBrush. Like they've taken a lot of the tools that are in regular ZBrush and kind of just removed them and simplified it. I think it's a good uh, way to kind of get used to the idea of sculpting and like what these brushes do, because a lot of these brushes are in, all these brushes are in ZBrush. However, you don't use all of them. Like I hardly ever use slash, hardly ever use snake hook. Um, pinch is kind of a fringe case scenario, but yes. But the premise is that you have this object, right, and you have these tools that kind of perform differently. Each brush kind of does a little bit of a different thing. And if I'm just in standard right now, and I drag across this sphere, you can see that it's kind of just pushing that surface out. It's kind of putting more clay, so to say, on that surface. I'm just going to Control Z to undo that. And if I go into clay buildup, it does the same thing. However, this one, you can see that it's not as soft, and I kind of like that. It gives a little bit more texture to the object, makes me not stick to trying to make a clean, super nice, smooth surface upon first try. But in ZBrush, we will remove the alpha that gives it that square kind of stroke pattern on it, and we'll be kind of using nothing on there, and you'll still get a different appeal than standard, because standard is just kind of, it's a little bit too smooth, you know, it kind of eases in and out of that stroke, so I don't like that too much. But let me undo these. Now, I was just putting stuff onto the surface right there, right? Yep. However, if you want to instead kind of start to carve away at that surface, you can hold Alt. Now, Alt for a lot of these clay sort of build-up brushes are going to do, it's going to just push in. But Alt does function differently on different brushes. It's good to just experiment on your own to kind of figure out what they're going to end up doing to your mesh. And I'm just gonna smooth that out. Now, in order to smooth, you can hold Shift and drag across the surface, and it's gonna kind of try to like smooth out each of those polys that's in there. Now, inflate, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's kind of wherever you click and drag, it's gonna kind of push out, but it takes into account where that surface is kind of pointing. So notice how it's beveling out from this kind of downward facing surface in that direction. So yeah, it's going to take into account all of that. Pinch is not super useful all the time, but it does make some hard edges. I use a brush called Damien Standard in ZBrush to kind of do that same thing. We don't have access to it here with ZBrush Core Mini though, unfortunately. Now, move is greatly important. This brush is going to be what you use to mess around with your, basically the overall shape of your model. Like quite frequently, it's going to be you using the move brush. And as you can see, I can just kind of start picking this stuff and pulling on it, dragging it everywhere. It's like a nice soft selection from ZBrush. I mean from Maya, if you're using soft select in Maya. Now say I kind of want to squeeze it in to get more humanistic proportions. I'm going to have to up my brush size. And the way I'm doing this is I'm just holding that hard bracket right under the plus sign. And the other bracket will do the same thing. It's the same as Photoshop controls for that. You can also go up to here and just drag on this slider. It's a lot faster for those dramatic changes in draw size. You can also press S and it will put that little gizmo right under your brush so you can drag it on the fly. And I'm just going to push in on both sides right there. And it's nice that we have this little head right here because we can kind of start to match those sizes. I'm going to drag this down again. Kind of match the size of, or the scale detailing of that head. Let's get that jawline in there. And there we go. Oh. So notice how my mesh just kind of got way lower in density. That's because I'm using a huge brush. So be careful for that, because ZBrush Core Mini works with something called Sculptress Pro, or where it kind of dynamically subdivides your surface. Notice how a lot of this is nice and smooth, but then the parts that I've sculpted on, it's kind of subdivided for us to kind of get more detail in there. And that's in accordance with your brush size. Now, as far as these last tools, I'm just going to go quick through them. Snake hook kind of pulls on the surface. It's not dramatically useful within regular ZBrush if you're not using Sculptress Pro or like some sort of dynamic subdivision setting. Slash kind of just pushes in. Let's get a smaller size there. Slash kind of just pushes in. I find that Damien Standard in regular ZBrush does a more effective version of that. But this is fine. This is fine. Get stuff going. And finally, H polish is going to flatten out whatever you drag over it. So if I go in here, boom, see how it's kind of flattening that surface out. But I'm going for like a kind of smoother model, so I'm going to stick with these tools. And, like almost 90% of your work is going to be done with a few of these brushes. I mostly use clay buildup, inflate, move, and Damien Standard. That's pretty much it in regular ZBrush. But as always, there's exceptions to that. Like you're definitely going to find scenarios where like, oh, this tool would be a lot better for that. So let's do that. And I'm just going to kind of go in here. I'm just holding Alt on this to carve in and give this character kind of a big nose. Don't be too bothered if this character doesn't have a lot of appeal at the end of this, because I'm just kind of giving a brief overview of the tools, not giving a character art sort of lecture. Yeah, so I'm just kind of going in and building those different planes of the face. I'm going to use my move tool to kind of drag this chin over. I'm going to press S and increase that brush size. I'm going to drag that towards the front. And let me go back to my clay buildup. Press S. Right there. And so that's pretty much it for like the brush tools. But there are a few additional tools that I kind of want to go over. Let me get a mouth in here real quick. Right there. Actually, let's dent that in a little bit lower to kind of create that chin area. And I'm just making the upper lip as well. But yeah, I'm not going for quality here, really, guys. I'm just going for brief overview. I'm just going to put in some eyelids to kind of be a placeholder of where those actually would be on the legit finished version. And one of the biggest issues with the ZBrush Core Mini is that you can't have other objects in the scene. There's no subtools over here. It's pretty unfortunate, but what a subtool is, it's kind of like another object that you put in, and commonly at this point I would put in an eye, like an actual orb in here on both sides to kind of map out where we're going to put in our eyes, because they have to fit in the skull and snugly behind the eyelids. And that's a really important facial feature that unfortunately we can't really use. So I'm gonna go back to my move tool, kind of move this in. And mop this out. I'm gonna drag this back. So yeah, we're basically just the reason this is like such a good program is that you can like kind of freeform make this. Like we don't have to worry about extruding edges and like our topology and modeling it. We can kind of split that up into a separate phase. And so once we're done here, what we're going to do is export it to Maya and retopologize it. And if you want to do that, you can click the export for 3D printing button right here, get this .obj, and then import that into your Maya scene. But before we go, there's a few other tools I want to go over that are good to know. Sorry, I'm going to stop messing with this. They have, right now you can see that I'm making symmetrical strokes right now. So if I press X, you can see that it toggles off, so I can make asymmetrical shapes, which is pretty interesting. A lot of character work is going to be symmetrical though, but if you're going for high fidelity, usually the human face is not symmetrical, so they are not perfectly symmetrical. You'll see little imperfections here and there, so it's good to get that in. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's this little toggle as well for perspective. Turns it off and on, and when it's off, you're looking at an orthographic view. So basically, what you see here when it's off is not going to be representative of what it will look like in other 3D programs that are like if you render out with a perspective-based camera, it's going to look like this. So you want to make sure that you're working with that on. That's why we don't toggle it off very frequently. Yeah, you can also toggle the polygon sort of wireframe and look at that and have a good time with that. But yeah, other than that, it's pretty much all those tools, and you just export with that button, this button right here, that .obj, and then you're good to go. All right, thanks.